Hello and welcome to Polity Matters. My name is Scott Edberg. Today I am not joined by Jared Nelson or Ben Ratliff. They are actually disqualified from being on today. It's a special episode that doesn't apply to them. That is because we'll be looking at the office and the work of stated clerks. Stated clerks are found in our churches, on our sessions. They are found in the presbytery, and they are found at the General Assembly. And so today we're going to look at the work of the clerk and perhaps some tools and tips for how to clerk well and to perhaps better familiarize ourselves with the work. Sometimes guys might not want to volunteer to be the stated clerk of their own or their own sessions because they don't know what is entailed in the work. And so we hope to answer some of that today. And so since they're not with me, I'm not alone. Today's called meeting, I have with me Elliot Wood, a ruling elder and stated clerk for his church. Elliot, would you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Scott. I'm excited to be here. It's been a lot of fun listening to the podcast and learning the Book of Church Order from you guys. And just want to say, I think it's a fun. You'll bring so much humor to it, for one thing, but also I just really appreciate the variety of perspectives you bring to it. So my background, I've been in Presbyterian churches my entire life, but joined Briarwood in eighth grade back in 1989. And then I came to Nashville in 1994 to go to school, and I've been here ever since then, and a member at Christ Community Church in Franklin. And I think I've been an elder for about 8 years. I was a deacon before that. Once a deacon, always a deacon, though. And I've been clerk of session here for a little over a year and a half, I think. So, but professionally, my background is mostly helping churches with technology. And a lot of that has been helping them with their church management software, which of course is of interest to clerks everywhere because it should be their role. I was just listening to the episode, I think, on BCO 12, and y'all were discussing the roles of the church and how many churches have multiple systems of record, and they're all out of sync. So I love to help churches get their systems of record lined up and in order, and down to one at least system of record, and then if they have other databases and things like that, those are secondary. But I started a company about a year ago called Strategic Matter to help organizations get clear on their purpose, get aligned as a team, and then around about a year ago, right after I became clerk of session, I realized that we just didn't have good tools for managing the job of clerks. So my co-partner, who is also a ruling elder in the PCA on sabbatical right now, Phil Hunt, and I formed Orderly Meetings to build a software platform to help clerks manage all of the governing stuff of their roles, and other secretaries, secretaries of diaconates and clerks of session, and the platform would work for other denominations that have other structures as well. But that's a little bit of what I do professionally. So.
Yeah, we'll get into some of that in a little later in the episode. I think as I became a clerk just over a year ago in Indiana Presbytery, and I think the first overwhelming moment was planning the first meeting and all that went into it. And then the second overwhelming experience was compiling all of the records for the year and submitting them.
Right.
Where you're just like, how do I compile these things? I got Word documents, I got Pages documents, I have PDFs. How does one merge all of these into one neatly packed system that looks well? Because I just can't do it poorly. It just hurts my heart to. And so those are the two things that
Yeah.
overwhelm me. But before we perhaps jump into the overwhelming parts of the clerk, maybe this is overwhelming. What do clerks actually do is perhaps where we will start. What is the purpose of a clerk? Elliot, do you want to start with that or do you want me to?
Yeah, either way. Yeah, do you want to start with that? And I'll
Yeah, I
detail
can.
commentary.
So when we're thinking of clerks, we already mentioned that there are three levels. They all function in similar ways, but perhaps slightly different. The local church has their sessional clerk who works with the pastor, who's the moderator. Then at the regional level, the same sort of thing. The stated clerk of the presbytery, along with the moderator, they work together, as well as then the general assembly. It just gets larger and larger. When I think of a clerk, I think of perhaps the primary work that he's doing is maintaining records. He's the one that maintains minutes and reports, make sure that they are preserved adequately, that they're prepared for review. They create historical archives, right, with those minutes. And so not only are you taking the minutes, but you're creating a history and log of your minutes. Clerks also often oversee correspondence with the outside world as well as the inner parts of the ministry itself. They field those. Sometimes that seems like it's the secretary or administrative assistant's job, but the stated clerk is actually tasked with navigating correspondences throughout the church. You can see it makes more sense in the Presbyterian assembly level. As things get bigger in a 100-member church, it's not that big of a deal. They also prepare those meetings, those things that are exhausting to prepare. They are the ones that compile the documents for those meetings and then distribute those documents to the session so that they'll be prepared for the meeting. You know how your ministry is ran by how your clerk prepares for your meetings. If you have a clerk who prepares poorly for meetings, then your meetings might be less focused and less productive, but also longer somehow. And so having that work being in the preparatory department is essential. Those are some things. What else do you do, Elliot, in the clerk's world?
Yeah, so certainly all of that. And I think part of the, coming into the role of clerk, before being asked to take the role, I saw the taking the minutes as the visible part of it, and I don't think I really had quite the understanding when I said yes of the rest of it. And we've been in a little bit of some governing rework. Our bylaws were about 40 years old and a little bit out of date. We needed to redo some things in them just to make sure we're compliant with the BCO, compliant as well with the Secretary of State in Tennessee. And so one of the things that I think is important is that most of the time, and it's not always the case, but most of the time, the bylaws would make the clerk the secretary of the corporation, which brings with it some additional responsibilities to make sure that, say, we are filing the right things, that we have a registered agent, that we have insurance, that we have, a signature on deeds and things like that would be the clerk, which suddenly means that, well, you really want to make sure everything's in good order because you're the person now signing some piece of paper that has both ecclesiastical standing and also civil government standing. And so the stakes get a little higher than just, I took the meeting minutes, but a lot of that is trying to guide that process. So with the bylaws, it's okay. Here's what we have. Here's some analysis of what we may need to change, and let me guide our working group. We formed a team of us that included the president of the corporation, the moderator, a lawyer that's on our session, some of the staff to go, okay, here's what we have, here's what we need. What's going to be the process that we discuss what needs to be in the bylaws versus in, say, rules of order for the session itself? What's already in the BCO that we don't need to state again? But we went through that together, and then we're in the process now. We need to ratify that with the congregation because they are the actual members of the corporation. So then that was one of the changes that we made, was that the original bylaws had 0 members of the corporation. So those are the kinds of things that kind of maybe surprised me at the beginning, that those are in the court of the clerk's responsibility to oversee. The church I'm part of is a very staff-led church. I think we've got 40-something staff. So a lot of the clerk's responsibilities are day-to-day handled by a staff person. So we have somebody on staff that's managing our member roles in the church management software, and that is giving me a membership report each month that then we're we're voting on in session. But it's still ultimately my responsibility to make sure that's accurate, that we're doing it, that we're recording it. So even if that staff person is doing some of those things or filling out the statistics report annually,
Mhm.
that I'm still putting eyes on it and attention to it and making sure we're doing it and doing it well. So
Yeah, there's some good resources. There's on the PC, if you type in like a Presbyterian Church or a PCA clerk's download page, at the
mhm.
bottom of that download page, there is a sessional clerk's handbook.
Yeah,
And in that handbook, it has guidelines for, I think, bylaws, articles of incorporation, and things like that, which are very important. And even if your church is old, it doesn't mean that you have good bylaws
right.
or good articles of incorporation.
Yeah.
And so those things need to be tended to. And I find that the denomination has provided very helpful resources. And they have that
Yeah,
also for the presbytery clerks,
yeah,
recommended
that
bylaws.
page of Presbytery resources, I think is
Mm-hmm.
the title of it is really handy. And I think Per Almquist wrote most of it or assembled it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
280 something pages of helpful information. I wish we would all kind of read it just because it gives such a good understanding of things. I've actually written a little something for handing out this year. So you're the clerk, now what? It's a kind of very practical handbook that we've written that kind of hits on a lot of the things that we're talking about today. That I kind of wish I'd had a really quick, Cliff's Notes guide to when I came into the role.
So how did you come into the role?
So I came into the role about mid year because the clerk before me had some personal and job changes that were kind of eating up his time and his life, and so the pastor called and asked me if I would be willing to take the role. In the next meeting, the session voted to make that change. So obviously that's not just a pastor's assignment; it is a nomination and election by the session, which would be important. It does seem to be, it can be a perpetual office because if you're willing to take it, if you're willing to take it, nobody's ever going to run against you, I think. So like,
No.
unless your bylaws call for a mandated sabbatical, we've had a few really good and dedicated clerks through the years that have served in the role for many years consecutively. But
Yeah, our
that's how.
clerk before me in Ileana had served the presbytery for 15 years and moved on to a new call in the middle of his current term, and so it just came open, and there's me and one other guy in the presbytery eyeing it, and he
Yeah,
decided to defer to me, and I said, well, this is probably I can do some restructuring. Our presbytery needs a lot of restructuring, and so we are in the middle actually of rewriting our bylaws and standing rules, and so we're going to have
okay,
two
yeah,
documents, and it's quite the work. I actually have a meeting for it tomorrow to
yeah.
divvy up tasks because we're hoping to get it pushed through pretty quickly here. But we have just scrapped the old and we're going to rewrite to actually fit our current needs because we're not a large
Yeah.
presbytery, but we have too large of a standing rule to actually do what we need to do well.
Yeah, I think
And
a lot of
so,
times, when the process gets too big or the rules get too long, they become encumbering of the organization
yeah.
for the sake of process. Whenever, as much as I'm a high C on a disc test, love compliance and love steps and process, we want to make sure the process serves us and we don't serve it. So,
Yeah, a funny part of our current standing rules, if you like tally up how many TEs and REs have to serve on committees, there are 50 vacancies. And currently in the presbytery with every ruling elder and teaching elder, we have 54 people.
okay.
And we only have 28 people participate.
Yeah.
And so
So, yeah.
it's like we can't function. And it's discouraging because all of our committees are half staffed. And
Yeah.
so we're
Yeah.
hoping to fix that. But that's how I came into it. What was perhaps the most surprising thing when you became clerk?
I think the most surprising thing, because I wasn't aware of it, and I think the National Presbytery had just started it the year before, so it had not been a thing that had been talked about in our session, but review of session records, and I think maybe the week or two after I became Presbyterian, before I even realized that the Presbytery knew we'd made the change. I got an email from the Review of Session Records Committee. Can you send us last year's records? And I'm like, oh gosh, what is this about? And so that was kind of the wake up moment for, oh, there's process, there's certain specifics. I'm not just taking notes. There's rules around this, and starting to dig into that. So honestly, for me, part of the benefit of that was pretty quickly I saw here's a checklist that we're going to get checked against,
Hmm.
and that was part of the impetus for, okay, we need some tools for managing this, because that session records committee is reaching out to 30 sessions and chasing them for months to get everybody's records turned in, and they're getting them via Google Docs and zip files and carrier pigeons and whatever, and trying to kind of assimilate all of those into some orderly process to review them. And then there's about 30 items on our Presbytery's checklist. So, do the math. There's 300 check boxes that have to be
Hmm.
reviewed by somebody, and we're 300 sets of minutes and 30 sets of questions. So that's
Yeah.
like 9,000 total, total items to be checked each year. And how can we make that more simple?
Yeah.
Became kind of a big thing for me. But
Yeah, those are the check boxes. I serve on the review of sessional records as well, and the check boxes are the easy stuff that you can. When minutes are turned in well, you can control F and see that,
right,
okay, here's a stated meeting, here's a called meeting, here's their absences, and you can check them pretty quickly if you have the check boxes. It's the substance that often takes a little more time because you want to make
yeah,
sure that your churches are constitutionally acting appropriately. And
yeah,
that's not a checkbox. That's you have to
yeah,
read and you have to
exactly.
digest. But that checkbox is helpful, especially for new clerks. If you're a
Mhm.
clerk on a session and you know that you're going to have to, well, you should have to have your minutes reviewed, you should be able to get that form from whoever runs that committee.
Yeah.
Or it's even there's a form in as we just mentioned, the clerk's handbook that
Mhm.
outlines some of that as well. So if you do all those, you should be okay for the most part. But what's the day to day for your work as a clerk?
Yeah, so the day to day for me, most of it is just preparing for our monthly meetings. So our church, we have a monthly stated meeting. We actually have several kind of bundled together. So
Hmm.
actually just this month we're starting our stated plenary session in joint session with the diaconate. So just to kind of do announcements and alignment and what's coming up and be together a little bit. So we have decided that we feel like it's really important to at least be in the same room for the first half hour of our monthly meeting. And then we'll break up and we have a plenary session meeting. So that's got an agenda that will be all of the members of the session. Um, and then we break up into commissions. So we've divided into a shepherding commission and a governing commission. We have a little over 30 total elders on our plenary, and we've got 7 on the governing commission, and then the rest, or everyone, is part of the shepherding commission. But who needs to be dealing with the budget every month, and the staffing question, and the this, that, and the other. We've drilled that down to say, here's 7 people that are going to be responsible for those kind of things. And then as a group, as a total, we're dividing our congregation into parishes and assigning parish teams to follow up and do the shepherding work, uh, contacting all of our members regularly. We have about I think about 1,500 total members that are active on the roll, somewhere around there. So, how do we divide and make sure that we are contacting and caring for and shepherding our members, and as we note, inquiring onto how they're doing spiritually, instead of just kind of waiting to bump into them at the grocery store and hear that they're going somewhere else for the past 6 months. So,
Yeah, the Presbytery level is somewhat similar, not as granular with church membership. Obviously, I think that comes in like spurts, my work. My presbytery meets in October, January, and then April. And so from like right now till October, there's like a nothing almost, it seems. and then it really gears up in the fall. I think the planning of the presbytery meeting is probably where I've overhauled our presbytery the most, which is trying to ensure that our committees actually submit reports on time so that I can compile them and then send them out. Before I took over as clerk, minute or the reports from the various committees would come with the chairman at the day of
Do the meeting. Yeah,
presbytery.
yeah.
And so it would draw out our meeting because you'd have to sit there, read the report, digest the report, and then figure out what things you had to actually action on from the report. And so our meetings would be, even though we're only 28 people, they would take like 8 hours to process
Yeah.
everything through. And so I thought if we could really get that information out and prepare it in a way that the commissioners know what's information from what's actionable, that's kind of how I've separated it, then we can move fast through the docket because we know what we have to hear and then what we have to do. That's probably that takes lot of work to compile all that and to get the docket up to snuff for that. But also a lot of questions get asked of presbytery clerks, updates on certain things of ministries within your bounds.
Mhm.
A lot of emails come in that regard. You field all the correspondences. I don't have any staff under me, and so whenever someone emails the presbytery, it goes through me, and I have to figure out where it needs to go or how I need to handle it,
Yeah.
which
So
does
I've
happen.
taken a really proactive approach to a monthly cycle. So one of the things that I kind of
Mhm.
saw that goes to your point is like, how do I make sure that we can get the agenda in front of everybody with enough notice that I'm not waiting until, we meet on Sundays. I'm not waiting until Sunday night to send out an
Mhm.
agenda. So at the beginning of every month, I have a scheduled task to open the agenda um, for editing. And I'll share that with our executive director and pastor. I'll start to put anything that's old business that I know that we're bringing forward into that based on the last month's minutes, and then invite them to come in and start adding to it. And then I've got another scheduled task about a week before our stated meetings
Mhm.
to reach out to anybody that needs to report. So membership, office, any committees or commissioners that are needing to
Mhm.
report on something, send me whatever you've got so that by Wednesday, I hopefully have any attachments or handouts that I want to include in the agenda and be able to send that out by Thursday. So everybody, at least by Thursday, will have an agenda with any pre-read attachments that would be helpful for them to come prepared. Um,
Yeah.
and what's really helped is just having that on my calendar and making sure that I send those emails and don't hope that the responsible people will remember that they're responsible.
Yeah, that's perhaps a good tip for clerks. Having repeatable reminders in your phone for actions that you know you have to do. I think it's helpful for pastors to do that as well, but being a clerk, it's helpful to know that, okay, our presbytery meeting is in October, the second Saturday. That means at the beginning of September, I'm going to remind all my committee chairs that I will need their reports by the end of the month and meet sometime between now and the end of September because at the beginning of October, the first week of October, I'm going to be sending them out. And I do a slight shaming in my reports. So I have appendices, and so all of our reports are appendices. And if you fail to submit your report to Ileana Presbytery, I do what the BCO does, and I keep your appendices there, but I say that this page isn't intentionally left blank. And so
Mhm.
it reveals that
There is
the
there is
committee
no
either didn't
report.
meet or they failed to submit their documents in time. But yeah, having repeatable every like one about I think it's like 45 days out. Presbytery is a little larger, and you have a little more committee movement. But 45 days out, I have a reminder that always reminds me, hey, you need to email everyone, ask if there's anything that needs to be added to the agenda, and those reminders pop up. They're all automated in my system, and you don't need to spend money for that. I mean, reminders can do that for you for free, and that's how I would encourage guys to get a handle.
Mhm.
Being
Yeah.
a clerk can be overwhelming, and part of the reasons it's overwhelming is because you don't have a system that helps you yet. I mean, when you just walk into it, you don't have that system. Once you
Yeah.
create the system, it can just repeat the system like you were just talking about.
Well, one of the things I'm trying to do too is, I came in, there was no playbook for our
Hmm.
church for the role. So one of the things I've been trying to do is document so that whether it's me or somebody else, we're repeating the same system. Somebody else would inherit our playbook. Obviously, there's good tools out there to get a start on that from the denomination, from your presbytery, but we need to have ours. What's the email address? We created an email address in the church's domain, session.clerk at. So that way I can put my clerk hat on the days that I've set aside time to be
Hmm.
clerk. And because it's a second job for everybody, maybe a third or fourth job for everybody. So being able to kind of go, okay, I'm going to carve out my time. I'm going to have any email, any correspondence coming to Elliot as the clerk to that email address. And I drill it home in every meeting. If you need to get something on the agenda, if you have questions, if you need to, get an excused absence or whatever, don't send it to me personally, send it to the clerk. And then that way, when I sit down to prep my minutes, I have all of my excused absence requests in one place. I'm not digging through text and work email and personal email and
Hmm.
whatever. It's all in one place.
Yeah, so getting back, let's dive a little deeper into that. What are some of your best practices? We'll get into the software that you're developing and just right after this. But what are some of your best practices as a clerk? What are some things that general clerks might find helpful in their
Yeah.
service as they work?
So certainly, obviously, we talked about just setting up a system that's cyclical, communicating that to everybody. So we probably talk about it about every meeting that, hey, here's what you can expect from me, is that I'm ready to receive your agenda items starting the first week of the month. We meet the third Monday of the month, unless there's a holiday or something. So setting the expectations with the rest of the session, with the moderator, with the other staff that are involved, lets everybody know what the rhythm is. So we can
Hmm.
be in rhythm together is kind of a key best practice. And then being able to keep my one very important best practice, I think, is having a system of records. So one of the issues
Hmm.
I've seen, and one of the reasons we started orderly meetings was uh, hearing of clerks who, maybe they were keeping minutes or agendas or their documents in their personal Google Drive or their work Google Drive. And what happens when you lose your job and all of the clerk's records are in uh, your work OneDrive is that the church loses its historical documents. So we want to make sure that wherever you keep it, it's the church's record. So
Hmm.
whether it's Microsoft Teams or Google Drive or something else, it's not my personal computer laptop where the only copy of it is. It's not my personal Microsoft account. It's the church's account, which is why we created that session.clerk Microsoft account. So all of that stuff can live there and be permanently stored there. And then, of course, we do have the paper copy that we're going to print once a month. And we've got a good little system there where I drop it in and I tell uh, the the pastoral office administrator that the minutes are saved into the file and she can print them and she can put them into the binder. So I don't actually have to come down and print them out and three-hole punch them and put them in the binder. But um, so those are some of the best practices I've had, is just getting in those rhythms, and then making sure that we have defined systems of record for our records. Oops, I think
I
I'm
muted
muted.
myself.
Yeah.
I was just thinking through some of my own practices. File structure is incredibly important. I've been tinkering with like what is the perfect file structure for maintaining records. I have done way too much listening of various methods that that I can't even outline all of them from Zettelkasten and all sorts of different approaches. I have found just dates and years tend to be the
Yeah.
easiest for clerking because everything is time sensitive and usually tied to some sort of date for a
Yeah.
meeting. And so I've kind of defaulted on that, but having that file structure helps you. So if you just have like a 2025 session file that includes all of your individual documents, but I've actually what I've tried to do as a clerk, both presbytery and then as a moderator for my church, is try to learn from the assembly. And so this might be somewhat odd, but I take personal notes on how the General Assembly manages itself, and I try to apply some of those principles in my own management of church records. And so even things with like handouts, like I in my own presbytery folder, I have individual files, and then I have a whole handbook for presbytery. And where did I get that? I didn't create it. It's
Right.
helpful, but I got it from the what the assembly does when they send us the commissioner handbook. But maintaining files and having structures that make it easy to manage those files do help when you have to submit those files, but also when you need to find those files as you look for them. Another thing that I find personally helpful, and I don't know how this would translate to, I think this might translate to a session, is pre-drafting minutes.
Hmm.
I sit pretty during presbytery. Everything for me at Ileana is before the meeting, and I know what every committee recommendation is going to be, and so I could pre-draft minutes based on those committee recommendations, and then just fill in the blanks as I go and take necessary notes. I can focus a little better on the actual discussion because I already know the presupposed outcome. That doesn't mean that it will be that. Sometimes there's a
Right.
wrench thrown into those recommendations and you get them undone, recommitted, or changed altogether. But having, I think, the anxiety of a clerk, you don't have to feel as anxious if you go in so prepared that you have, oh, here are the minutes for our next meeting already done.
Yeah.
It's immense help. And instead of taking notes where you're going to have to go back and then draft all the minutes over the next weeks, you'll just have to edit your minutes as you go rather than having to take notes. And so I think that was advice. Again, I didn't create that advice. That was advice given from seasoned presbytery clerks saying it makes your life incredibly easier if you just prepare the minutes before you go in and then fill in the
Yes.
details as you need.
So I started doing that with my with anything I knew was coming that needed a decision. Whoever was bringing that item before us, I'd say, send me your motion before. I'm going to put it in the agenda that the committee or the chairperson or whoever is bringing forward a motion for this purpose. And then of course in our software, when I start the meeting, I hit the agenda the meeting button, and it converts my agenda directly into minutes, and then I just start editing from there. So I think that's been really helpful, and it helps streamline the discussion in the meeting because
Yeah.
instead of trying to wordsmith a motion and then get it seconded and then come up with whatever amendments or substitutions. And we don't have much of that at a session level. See a lot of that at a presbytery level where somebody comes with a motion and then there's, amendments on amendments on amendments.
Hmm.
But if I can at least have the main motion already written before we get there, it makes the discussion a lot easier because we can all know what we're actually deciding on.
Yeah, we had a contentious issue in Ileana a few meetings ago, and we had the committee's recommendation, and I was talking to a friend who wanted to offer an additional recommendation on top. And I said, I mean, the meeting's in a month from now. Why don't you just get that recommendation written and sent to me? And so when we actually got to the meeting, I already knew he was going to make that additional motion, and I didn't have to ask him three times to restate his motion. I already had it
Right.
in hand. And whenever the presbytery asked me to reread it, I reread it. And it saved a lot of time because I knew what was coming. It's kind of like that on the overtures committee as well, where as I've been running the screen, I'll be running the screen. I ran it last year. I'll run it this year again. You have your email on the displayed the entire time, and people will just send you amendments to random overtures throughout the entire meeting. And it's so much easier that I could just copy and paste it from, the email straight into the document. And then by the time we get to that overture, I already have what is proposed as an amendment. It streamlines the entire meeting, and you don't waste time trying to figure out what the actual motion is because it's already
Yeah.
before the body because of how it's communicated. And so perhaps
Makes
that's
sense.
helpful for both clerks and for session members as well as presbytery members. Like email your clerks your motion or text them, text them, email them, whatever. Just get it to them so you don't have to slowly listen to them and try to be a typographer and getting every word down.
It's impossible to type while people are watching you. So um,
Yeah.
no matter how good a typist you are, as soon as you're doing it in front of everybody else, your fingers become enormous and fat. So,
Yeah, that is true. That's how the Overtures Committee is, as your Microsoft Word document is being displayed for 100 people, and they're like, "Hey, doofus, it's 3 lines down," and you're like, "I know, I
yeah,
just can't find it."
I can't see it because you're here. Yeah. So
Well, why don't you outline? We were thinking about just general, perhaps best practices. I know that you and Phil Hunt have produced a resource that you hope to launch here as we head into General Assembly. Why don't you outline orderly meetings and how you hope it will be a benefit to the church?
yeah, so Orderly Meetings is a new software platform. We're just going truly live with as a platform. We've had some beta team members jumping in and playing with it, but the idea came because as I was diving into clerking, I wanted to solve some of the problems of sending out the final agenda.pdf, and then you get one more change, and you're constantly kind of trying to deal with version updates and attachments and all of that kind of thing, and then you got to convert it to minutes, and then you've got all this back and forth emailing of different documents and things like that. I think that was kind of the first problem to solve. Then the second problem to solve was, and really where we've actually ended up putting most of our effort, is in the review of records process. So recognizing that these poor review of records team members have to chase everybody for all the meetings, and then they get records that are incomplete because the clerk of session didn't check them against the checklist before submitting them.
Hmm.
How can we reduce this whole timeline? I mean, if you think about it, what usually happens is that sometime around March or April, you'll get a request for the previous year's January through December minutes. And then sometime by, say, August, they'll have been finished being reviewed if everybody turned in all their stuff. So then at that fall meeting of the presbytery, they're going to present their recommendations and findings to the presbytery for their citations. Well, that means that the clerk that's getting his citations sometime toward the end of 2025 is getting those for January of 2024. He has no recollection of that meeting. We're going to go back and do corrections on those in January of 2026, a full 24 months later. And so part of our goal is to be able to shrink that time and go, okay, let me finish my meeting in January. We'll approve those minutes in February. By February, I'll have already checked the minutes through a built-in checklist that says, that I've inherited from the Presbytery Review of Records Committee, that I can go, okay, did we open in prayer? Did we have a quorum? Did we note it? Did we, check, check. If I've got any issues there, then I can resolve them prior to approving the minutes. Once I approve those minutes, then I can submit them on their way to the review of session records, or eventually potentially from presbytery to the review of presbytery records, which means they then have them within 2 months of that meeting, and they can of course review them at any point in time as their cycle and cadence makes sense. Right now, what we've built is the ability for them then to go in and check the list, record any citations or notes, whether it's a issue of form or an issue of substance. The page, there's some details built into the platform. We have a lot more ideas, but at that point, once they've done the checklist, they can mark it as done and send those citations back down to the submitting clerk. And we have some ideas on even making some queuing on that, because they're a committee and they have to submit their findings to the presbytery for approval before they can really send them back to the clerks. We're working on some ideas around how to queue that. But the long and the short of it being, how can we reduce the amount of time that it takes these volunteer servants to go through and do the work, but also the distance of time from the original meeting to the time that a clerk gets their citations and then responds and corrects them. So and simplify the whole process, right? So I'm not chasing all that paperwork via email and mashing up different spreadsheets and copy and paste and all of that stuff. So so that's a big part of the platform. But then part of it is also just being able to give everybody that is a member of the session access to see the agenda as it's coming up and the minutes as they are finished in real time without some of the hurdles that some of the other file sharing tools might have for, everybody has to have, and know how to use Microsoft or Google or Dropbox or something. So trying to build it to be simple that way.
Yeah, I think probably what's most compelling to me is the compilation and the review side of things for your software. Compiling things is not easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible, but it's often a headache with PDF mergers where you're merging multiple documents together. They have to have unified page pigmentation and all that, and it's not just a simple merge and send. It's often takes me like an 8 hour thing to do Presbytery
Yeah.
stuff to get everything compiled
It's a
correctly.
huge time saver because when we create our sections and in orderly meetings, we can attach any file to it. We prefer PDFs, but it'll take a Word document or a PowerPoint or an Excel file, and then it just puts those on as attachments as in the order in which they're listed. And then we give this here's the sleeper feature that when I created it, I didn't quite expect how I would end up using it. But we created this function called outputs. And on each section of the agenda or the minutes, you can choose one of 5 output targets.
Mhm.
We just listed them as A, B, C, D, E. But this comes in really handy. I'm using it now because my minutes tend to be pretty sparse from a minutes perspective. I record the actions. I record that someone gave a report on the budget or whatever.
Mhm.
But I don't go into a lot of detail on any discussion or that kind of thing in the official minutes. But I do have a few elders that have said, hey, we'd like to have a little bit more of the context of that in our notes. And y'all talked about this in one of the previous episodes about where's the balance between Robert's Rules compliant minutes, which don't include anything but the actions. And, here's a court reporter's transcription of everything that was said and who said it. This little outputs button lets me go in one screen as we go, create a section that maybe is the notes that I only include in the packet that we send out to everybody as follow-up, but maybe doesn't go in the permanent record, if you will, and doesn't get submitted to the presbytery because it's not the official record. It's just the clerk's notes of the meeting.
Yeah.
And that could include things that, do you include prayer requests in your minutes? Probably not. Do we want to record in there that Joe stubbed his toe and is in a cast for the next month? No, that doesn't need to be in perpetuity. But we certainly might want to be sending that out to everybody. And this means I don't have to keep 3 different documents open to do that.
Yeah, I know Mel Duncan, after Presbytery, will send a document to the Presbytery that is the actions of Presbytery. And so it's kind of like a summary of everything that happened in the meeting. It's certainly more abridged than even the minutes themselves. It's just to keep those who were not at the meeting updated or to have a record for those who were at the meeting to remember what they did at that meeting. But it's not the minutes themselves. It's just like here are the actions. Here are the big things that happened at Presbytery this time, and that seems to also fall into that camp.
I think
Where
Dr. Chappell does a similar thing after General Assembly.
yeah,
I've got a spreadsheet right now of just an index of all of our motions and actions that I keep track of. Eventually, I hope to build that kind of functionality into orderly meetings. So anytime you enter a motion, it just indexes it and keeps it tracked. And we hope to add some AI that would go,
Mhm.
hey, did you know y'all took up this issue 4 years ago? And and basically be a virtual Roy Taylor that could go, hey, you already did this. When you're at General Assembly and somebody will raise a point of order, hey, didn't we already do this 5 years ago? And somebody calls Dr. Taylor up and says, and he goes, oh yes, we did that here, and this is where it's recorded. We want to build some of that kind of functionality into the platform.
Yeah, I think that kind of functionality with the checklist sort of thing with AI could be indispensable, where I don't have to waste my time to see that it says it like where there's stated meetings, where they're called meetings. If a
Yeah,
checklist could automatically find that and
yeah,
say, okay, here's every meeting, and we automatically found that, I mean, that would save hours of my life
a lot of
as
time.
a review of sessional records guy.
And at Presbytery, in our Presbytery, we have a recording clerk and a stated clerk in meetings. I don't know that every Presbytery has a recording clerk. But it does become, I think it would be really helpful to have that searchability to be
Hmm.
able, because issues come up that somebody raises their hand and says, didn't we discuss that 24 years ago? I thought we'd resolved this issue already. Are we sure we want to take it up again?
Yeah,
And to be able to go very quickly, yeah, we did, and this was the decision. Now, then you decide whether you want to take it up again, but
yeah.
maybe conditions have changed. But
When's the release for orderly meetings? And how much will it
so
cost and how does that all look? That's what I'm
yeah,
probably
so
most curious personally about.
So it's up today. It's at orderlymeetings.com. Right now, we haven't put the payment structure into the application. That is hopefully by the end of this week. I'm crossing my fingers. Still doing a little beta testing in our sandbox on the integration with the payment platform. But it'll start at $38 a month for the first assembly. We're using kind of a loosely the word assembly to refer to any deciding body in the church. So if you have additional assemblies in the church, so the first one would typically be the session. In my church, we have a couple of commissions that will be an assembly of their own. We have the diaconate that's in an assembly of their own. Additional assemblies are $20 a month as we start. And we're trying to figure out some maybe founders circle pricing for those that jump in early, or maybe jump in at General Assembly. And then the review and control piece is kind of an add-on layer. Not every church will need it right out of the gate. We have kind of two levels for that. One is internal review and control. So if your organization has multiple assemblies and those assemblies report to one another inside the organization, then that I think we're starting somewhere around $15 a month. And then if you have external review and control, which would be, say, a presbytery has review and control and is inviting other organizations, which would be churches or maybe other parachurch ministries that might report to that presbytery for some reason, those can be related, and I think we're somewhere around $28 or $30 a month for that add-on. Don't quote me on exactly what the final pricing was on that, but my goal in pricing it is that we be at such a number that a clerk would go, hey, that saves me enough time that I would just pay it for myself, even if the church opted not to. But when we looked at the market of other meeting management apps, a lot of them were $1,500 a month, where they were based on the number of members of the board you have or things like that. We wanted to be really simple in the way we do it. So, but that'll be you could sign up today. You just wouldn't yet get payment stuff on the portal. By the time the listeners get this, they should have I think we gave it a 45-day trial, and then they get to decide whether they want to do it. But one other thing I should say, we have a free version. So the free version allows two members, so essentially moderator and clerk, and allows you to build a basic agenda and keep minutes and submit minutes upstream to to a review commission. So at that free version, we wanted to make sure that a presbytery could adopt orderly meetings as their review of records product, without requiring that a church in that presbytery pay for a subscription. And so we wanted to strip any of that friction out of the way.
Yeah, I think that is very helpful as a qualifier. I was thinking about as you're talking about this, like hurdles of adoption, and how could, if a presbytery adopts it and pays $30 a month or whatever, well, then the churches, what if they don't adopt it? And I think
Right.
that perhaps that helps perhaps give that bridge where you can have minimal or what's necessary for functionality
Yeah.
that doesn't cost churches money, because I think that kind of approach will help and may
Yep.
even expand adoption.
Yeah. And we built a function too, just on that line. We know there's going to be some churches that are like, yeah, I'm not even going to use that, even if it's free. I don't care.
Mm,
I'm still going to send the carrier pigeon with with a thumb drive. And in those cases, we're building some functionality. It should hopefully be in the platform in the next week or two as well, so that that review committee can submit records into the platform on behalf of somebody else, and they just would upload the PDF
mm,
document from the submitting clerk uh, into the platform. That way, they can still use the checklist. They can still
mhm.
use the workflow for review without having to actually break out of that.
Yeah, well, that's helpful. How can people get a hold of you? Do you have a Twitter? How?
So we do have some social media. I think
Mm,
I think we're at Orderly Meetings on Twitter or X or whatever they call it this week. We're on Facebook. We've got a clerk work group on Facebook that we're inviting people to jump into. We can throw that to you in the show notes, where we just really want to have a place that clerks can chat about clerky things and ask clerky questions, um, and be a resource. The website is orderlymeetings.com. And then I think we probably have an Instagram. I think I did create an Instagram. We don't have very many pictures, so I don't put much up there. But
Are you an exhibitor at the General Assembly this year? Do you plan to do that next year? What does that look like?
we will be at the General Assembly this year as an exhibitor. So we'll have a booth, and love to see anybody that's there.
You
We'll
know,
be.
did you request that this year?
I did, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm on the AC. I must have approved it, and I guess you think I would have noted that, but you approved like not like I don't know, like 90
And there's
exhibitors.
yeah, a lot of them.
Oh, good. Well,
Well,
we look forward to that.
yeah, I don't know. I may need to double check with the office and make sure that they recorded us with the right name, because I talked to her about a couple of different entities,
Mm,
and we landed on just Orderly Meetings, but I know there were a couple of applications. But I do know from talking with another member of the committee that he did approve it. So
we
and saw
approved
it.
it.
So yeah,
They were
I'm
in
getting
omnibus
emails.
mostly. There's
Yeah.
most of them are non-controversial, and they're like yours. I mean, we're gonna spend an hour talking about orderly meetings. No, we're just gonna.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Let them on
Yeah.
in.
That's right.
Um,
So we-
all
we'll
right.
be there, but
Well,
we will not have stickers. Apparently, the convention centers do not like stickers
you're
at
not
the.
allowed to have stickers. That's why you don't
Yeah,
become an exhibitor and you just hand out stickers with impunity.
that's right. So,
You have books though, right? At your booth.
yeah, we will. We'll have a few. We won't have enough for everybody, but we've got a few of these. So that you're the clerk now. What that we'll print up, and we do have a disclaimer on the back that it is not endorsed or provided by the PCA. It's our opinion. So
It's our opinion, and if you get brought to the SJC, that's your problem, not ours.
that's right. That's right.
All right. Well, as Ben Ratliff would say, this podcast is over. Thanks for joining me, Elliot. It was good to talk about some of the work of the clerk and some tools, and we look forward to seeing how orderly meetings transforms and changes over time to see how it could be useful. I hope that many of our committees, as well as our sessions and presbyteries, can use them. It seems like it'd be even a greater asset to review of presbytery records, but that is probably a whole different discussion that you'll have to have with them. But thanks for having
Well,
us
we're
on.
having it.
Thanks for coming on, and we'll see you soon, I guess.
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting and inviting us in.
All right. Well, you have a good day.